Okay friends, it's time to get started on replacing our outside door handle. To replace this, we're going to have to remove our inside door panel. To start taking the door panel off, we're going to make our way right over to the mirror switch. To remove the mirror switch, I'm going to use a plastic trim tool so I don't damage the paneling here. You can also carefully use a pocket screwdriver if you can't get in between the two areas. Now, as I press down in the center here, there's going to be a tab located behind this area, holding it in. So I'm just going to carefully press it down towards the switch and gently twist. While I start pulling it away, there's also another tab on this side, closer to the window. Now for this one, generally all I do is I carefully put my finger in here and then I'll run mine down along the side. As I start putting my trim tool in along the side here, I'm pressing on that tab and I can carefully pull this out and away from the door panel. Now once you pull it out of there, you're going to want to have a look at the back side. You're going to find that you have a wiring harness that leads to the switch. On one side, you're going to have a locking tab. To remove that, you can either use your trim tool or that small pocket screwdriver. I'll carefully get in between the wiring harness and the switch itself, gently pry just far enough to pull it out. Now once I have it out of there, I always like to give electrical components a quick inspection. If you see any funny colors inside where the connector is, generally that's corrosion and it would need to be dealt with. Ours looks fine, so I'll go ahead and set this aside. I'll carefully push this inside the door panel, and now we can move along to where the window switches are located. To remove the window switch, I'm going to carefully get underneath this area right here with my plastic trim tool. I can feel that there's a little ridge that I can carefully get in between. I'm going to gently pry and start pulling this up a little bit as I do. Let's have a look from the back side. Now on the back side, you can see that you have 3 electrical connectors. We're going to start disconnecting these. For the green, you can see that there's a tab right here along this area. I'm going to use my pocket screwdriver and I'm going to carefully try pressing on this. You can also try to use your fingers or even some pliers if for some reason your fingers aren't strong enough. Always give it that close inspection. Looks fine. We'll continue on to the blue in the center here. There's a tab right along the side. We'll go ahead and press on that and gently pull this out as well. This one's a little bit harder to get to. It's down along the side right here. Just going to carefully get in between here. Gently pry, lift it up and out. Okay, now I have everything disconnected. I'll have a look at the back side of my switch to make sure it looks fine and set it aside. Now let's move along to this area. Behind your black handle, you're going to find a rectangular panel. I'm going to carefully use a pocket screwdriver, get in between this area without damaging anything, and gently pry. We'll go ahead and pull it right off of there, and you can have a look at the back side. There's going to be 4 locking tabs that hold it in place. Make sure they're still good and set that aside. Now behind that panel, you're going to find that you have 2 7mm headed bolts. We're going to remove the pair. There's one of our screws. Do the same to the other. Now that we have those 2 screws off, let's move along to this area. This is the inside door handle. We want to carefully remove the trim panel that goes behind the handle. I'll use my pocket screwdriver, gently get in between this area without damaging the door panel in any way. I'm going to gently pry as I make my way around until it pops free. Once you have it broken free, go ahead and pull on that handle and remove this from the door panel. We'll give it a quick inspection and set it aside. Now let's move down along the bottom of the door panel. You're going to find 2 5.5mm mounting screws. Now we can move along to removing the door panel from the door. To do this, I'm going to use a plastic trim tool. And essentially, I want to get in between the panel and the door itself and gently start prying it away. Now, behind the door panel, you're going to have several clips that look like this. It's common for them to pop out of place, and that's okay, because once we have it apart, we can carefully put them all back into place. Now, once you have it mostly broken free, we're going to carefully grab onto the door panel, and we're going to gently lift it up. Just be very careful for any pinch points. I don't want you to hurt your fingers in any way. There's our door panel. Go ahead and set that aside. All right, with the door panel out of the way, we have a nice clear view of our inside door handle. We're going to carefully start removing some of the insulation that's located around it. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to make my way down along here, and there's going to be some sticky tape that I'm going to carefully start pulling away. I want to reuse it, so I don't want to tear it into a whole bunch of pieces. Now, once I have that pulled away, I'm going to continue on to the foam insulator. Now, behind all that, you're going to find that you have two Phillips head screws. There's one down in the lower corner and one directly diagonal across from it. Let's remove the pair. Let's grab onto that door handle. We're going to give it a little wiggle and start separating it from the door itself. Now, as we start pulling this away from the door, keep in mind that you will have a rod that leads to the back of this that we will have to disconnect. So, of course, it won't just fall right out of there. You want to pay attention to the way that the rod comes up, curves two ways here. All we want to do is gently pull the handle away far enough that we can take this and gently twist the handle as needed to remove it. There it is, friends. With that out of the way, let's continue on to removing the inside vapor barrier. That's this area right here. As we start removing this, you want to be very careful not to tear it because we will be reusing it. Now let's move along to this area right down here. You're going to find that you have an 11mm headed bolt that holds the window channel that runs down along here in place. Let's remove this bolt. Now I can reach inside and I can move the window channel around a little bit so I can gain access to where I need to work. Now that we have that broken free, let's continue on with a trim tool. Now I'm going to use this trim tool, and essentially all I want to do is try to break this wiring free from the window channel. So I'll just carefully get in between this area and gently start prying. I don't want to damage the wiring in any way. All right, now that we have that window channel unbolted, we can carefully start removing it from the vehicle. We'll set this aside. And now we have a nice clear view of the inside of the door handle. You're going to see that you have two rivets on this. You're going to have to go ahead and get those out of there. You can use a cutting wheel or whatever you might happen to have, but you have to remove the rivets so we can go ahead and get this handle out of here. Now let's continue on with a pick. Looking inside here, you're going to find a yellow connector. We're just going to carefully get behind this little ear here and gently pry it off. Now, once you have that broken free, you can continue on by removing the rod from the area. Now let's continue on with a Phillips head screwdriver. I'm going to come right inside the latch here and essentially pretend that I'm the striker of the vehicle. Now the door thinks that it's latched shut. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and carefully close this. And you'll notice it only goes so far. That's great, because what we need to do is carefully, while we're pressing here, we're going to lift up on this. Then we're going to locate our 2 rivets. We'll go ahead and cut these right out of here. I'll lift this up. I'm going to use some long nose locking pliers. I essentially want to hold the handle so it's in the open position. All right, now that I have my locking pliers on here, holding the handle in the upright position, I'm going to continue on with my cutting wheel. You could also use a drill or a drill bit. Now that I have the head mostly carved away, I'll continue on by punching out the center. There's one rivet. Now I'll do the same to the other. Now I'll grab that door handle. I'm going to give it a little wiggle. It is possible that you still need to use some sort of prying device. When you do that, be very careful not to damage the paint on your door. Now from the back side, we'll just go ahead and remove that last rod. And there it is, friends. Let's wipe down the door where the new handle is going to go. All right, so now it's time to get ready to install our brand new door handle. Obviously, if you wanted it paint matched, now would be the time to do it before you go ahead and put it into the door. Otherwise, let's get ready for our installation. Let's take that rod and we're going to put it right on through this side right here. Now we're going to take that rod and we're going to slide it through the large hole right along this area. As we start bringing that down, I'm going to tilt the whole entire thing up like this so I can start putting the rest of it into the proper position. Now I'm just going to try to roll this down. There we are. So now I have it slid into the proper position. Looking inside here, I can see that both of my mounting holes are lined up the way that they should be. You can continue on with either some brand new rivets, or if you don't have rivets or don't want to use them, just go ahead and use some nuts and bolts. Just keep in mind, if you use any bolts, you might potentially catch your fingers on it underneath this area. Now I'm going to be using nuts and bolts. For me, I have a bolt. I'm going to take a washer and put it right on that bolt. I'll put it in through the front side of the door, and then I'm going to reach in from the inside with a locking nut. I'll hold that in place. Now I'll reach up in here, I'll start my nut on there. I'm not going to tighten this one until I get the other one started as well. Bolt with a washer. Now I'll use a wrench to hold each of those nuts as I tighten them from the outside. Make sure that's nice and tight. Move along to the other. Now I'm going to grab onto that handle. I'm going to try to pull it right off the door. Obviously, I don't want to break it, but I do want to make sure it's secure. This feels great, so we can continue. All right, now let's make our way back inside the door panel here. We're going to start reattaching the rod to our yellow connector. Now when I do this, I always try to take the rod and I'll gently push it up with my index finger as I push it into place into the connector. Now I'll continue by locking it in. We'll listen for a nice click, and I'm going to give it a tug, trying to remove it from that. Once again, I'm not trying to break anything, I just want to make sure it's secure. Now let's go ahead and grab our Phillips head screwdriver. I'm going to put it right in here, and what I want to do is I'm going to press with my thumb and grip with my index finger. I'm trying to press it in that direction. Now at the same time, I'm going to grab onto that outside door handle, and I'm going to try to pull up on it and see if it wants to unlatch. Now as you can see, it released as it should. Now I'm just going to go ahead and test this real quick. I'm going to shut the door. Shuts perfect. Feels as though it's latched in. Open it up. All right. At this point, we're sure that it works fine, and we can continue with our installation. Now we can go ahead and put in our window channel. I want you to pay attention to the top area here. You can see that there's a little hook. Now that's super important to pay attention to, because as we start sliding this up and into the door, there's an area that this is going to hook into, so you need to pay attention for that. After that, we're going to make our way down here to the lower mounting bolt. You can see exactly where it needs to line up with. All right, so I can see up inside here exactly where that little clip needs to lead up to. Slid right up in there. Now I'm looking down along the bottom here, and I'm trying to line up my mounting bolt holes. As soon as I can see it, bring it down a little bit. There it is. Now when you start putting this in, you'll notice that you can still flex it around. It's important to try to get it into the proper position. Typically, if you were to look at the paint on the door, you can see exactly where the large washer was sitting. In our case, it was pretty much pressed all the way up against this corner here. Yours might be a little bit different. If you don't line it up properly, your window could bind. Keep that in mind. Use your 11 millimeter to tighten this. Make sure that's nice and tight. I'm going to reach inside and I'm going to give it a wiggle. That feels pretty good. Now we can reconnect in the wiring harness here. We're just going to press this right in. Make sure that's secure, and also make sure it's not tangled around the window channel in any way. You don't want your window to come down and cut that wire. This looks great. Now we can bring this over, and we're going to try to line it up with its original position. You want to make sure you have all of the mounting holes lined up. Now I'm going to go ahead and hold onto the rod like this. We're going to take the inside door handle and hold it in the down position, just like this. We'll slide it on here. As it goes on, we're going to bring it right down, and it should look like this by the time we get it latched in. There we are. Now we have this area right here that we want to pay attention to. So what I want to do is I'm just going to put it inside the door. Let's go ahead and get it lined up. Slide it in up against the door as far as possible, and then lock it in. Give it a little wiggle to make sure it's semi-secured, and then we'll continue on with each of our mounting screws. One of those mounting screws goes up inside the top corner here. We'll go ahead and put that in. I'm going to leave that loose until I continue on with the other one. Once they're both started, snug them up. Now I'm going to tuck this inside here. For good measure, I'll just go ahead and remove whatever foam's left on here. Now we can set this down into that position. At this point, we're getting ready to go ahead and put the door panel back on. But while we were removing it, I had mentioned that there are a whole bunch of push tabs that could potentially get stuck in the door or even fall out. Either way, if there's some inside the door, you need to use a trim tool and go ahead and remove them. Once you have all of them out, we'll go ahead and place them into the door panel before we install the door panel on the door. Once you have all of the push clips out of the door, continue on by inserting them into the door panel. Basically, you just slide them right in through the slot. This gray wire here with the gray connector is the one that goes up to the mirror switch. Let's take that and put it up and through that hole, all the way up high. Now we'll continue on. As we bring this over, I'm going to take the other three connectors, the blue, gray, and green, and slide them up through the hole where the window switches need to be. Now as I bring this over closer to the door, I want you to pay attention to the area where my fingers are here. There's a lip. Now that lip actually needs to sit up and over the lip that's on the door right here. While we're talking about this area up along here, you also have your door lock. It's going to be easiest to put your door panel on with the lock in the upright position or unlocked position. We're going to have to line that up with the corresponding hole on the door panel. I'll bring it up nice and high, line up that door lock, slide it through the hole. As I start bringing it down, I'm pressing this towards the door and I'm trying to line up the lip with the top lip of the door. Now, once you have that lined up, we're going to continue on by trying to take a peek inside in between the door panel and the door itself. You want to find all those push pins and make sure they line up with the corresponding holes on the door. Once you feel as though you have them lined up, go ahead and press this right in so it's bottomed out against the door itself. Double check all the way around. If it feels like it's lifted away, more than likely one of those pins isn't lined up properly. You want to make sure you fix that. This feels fine. Let's continue on with the mirror switch. Have a look at the back side. You can see that you have this area that protrudes out a little bit. Looking at the wiring itself, you'll find the area that slides right into it. Line it up, latch it in. Listen for a click. I always give things a tug. Yep, that feels good. Now we're just going to go ahead and slide this in. There's two locking tabs, one along this area that goes along the side over here, and one up along the top. When I press, I always press along the base and never on the switch itself. Why break it? Make sure it feels as though it's secure and it's not going to move around inside that door panel on you. Now it's time to reattach the window switch here. Now we're going to take this and we're going to start putting it in. You can see that I have a couple push tabs here that need to line up with their corresponding holes on the door itself. Make sure that's nice and secure. Now we can put this on here. Looking at the back, you can see that you have some locking tabs. Those are just going to slide right in behind the panel as you press it in. We'll take this, we're going to pull on that inside door handle. Slide it right on through that square hole. We'll get it lined up with the area that it needs to be in and gently press it in. Let's put in our two mounting screws along here. Use my 7mm to get those in there. Make sure it's nice and tight. Now we'll use our 5.5mm to put in our lower mounting bolts. Time for our last plastic panel here. Looking at the back, you can find the locking tabs and the alignment tabs. Make sure everything lines up and carefully press it in.